Hello, my name is Ashley Boussiere. I'm a wife, a student, and employee of Liberty University. I'm studying interpersonal communication in the Human Services 508 D-Term 03 class, and my professor is Dr. West. On the next slide, we have defining interpersonal communication. There's communication as a whole, and then there's interpersonal communication. Communication is a continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. Interpersonal communication is when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximizes the presence of the person. So as you can see, there's verbal and nonverbal, and as people, we're always meaning making. We're trying to make meaning out of everything that we do and all different types of communication that we have. There's two levels of communication. That's sharing information and connecting with others. Those are different because sharing information, it happens a lot in the workplace. It actually can happen anywhere because connecting with others is really understanding what they're trying to say, is really the meaning making part of communicating. On the next slide, we see two different types of communication. That's exhaling and inhaling. Exhaling is expressing and disclosing, and that means revealing to another person how you are responding to that present situation and giving information that helps others understand your present responses. So that is trying to exhale, seek clarity onto the person that you are trying to give that information to. And exhaling is really important in relationships because without it, then there wouldn't really be a relationship. Inhaling, on the next slide, is perceiving and listening. Listening, as I've learned, is so important. And there's so many different facets of it. A good listener, as I've learned, is an accurate receiving, retaining information, sustaining information, attending to your own speech, and encouraging the person you are listening to. That is a big, those are a lot of, it's a big definition of what a good listener is. And that is the type of listener that I'm trying to build myself up to be. There's 3 levels of listening, and that is empathetic listening, hearing words but not really listening, and listening in spurts. I can definitely be all 3 of those. A lot of times though, I'm hearing words but not really listening. That is dangerous because I let the person who I'm listening to feel like that I'm actually empathizing with them and listening to them and hearing what they're saying, but sometimes I'm really not. On the next slide, throughout this whole class, I've learned so many different things, and now I have all these goals of what type of a communicator I want to be. I want to become a level 1 listener. That definition, what a good listener is on the previous slide, that's what I want to be. I don't want to judge others. I don't want to allow myself to be distracted, and I want to suspend my feelings to allow listening. I'm in youth ministry, and suspending my feelings to allow listening is very important. It's something that I don't do, especially with my husband. Sometimes when there's a disagreement between us two, I automatically let my emotions come into play when they really don't need to be. Fierce conversations. Relationships exist in the conversations that make them up. I think this is an excellent example of really how deep your relationships are and where they could be if your conversations were full of life and full of meaning and you were both inhaling and exhaling properly with one another. I want to have authentic, passionate relationships with others, and right now I feel like they're kind of at this level when I need them to be at this level. And now I know that it's my conversations and the depth of those that really make a difference. On the next slide, my behavioral blend. There's two different facets of a personality. It's what is expected of me and what is me. What is expected of me is what the public sees. It is IS, active and passive, people-oriented. The positive things, some of them are inspiring, submissive, passionate about people. I'm definitely those three things, but I also chose some negatives. There were more, but some of them were not decisive, natural shyness, and avoid confrontation. I definitely avoid confrontation, which is so destructive in relationships, because sometimes when something happens and I don't confront the situation right away, it just deteriorates the relationship. If it's something really serious, sometimes I just let it go, etc. On the next slide is who this is me. And this was from the Uniquely You assessment, by the way, which was so enlightening, and I really enjoyed learning about who I really am. CIS, which is passive, task-oriented, and then active and passive. Some of the positives are outgoing, friendly, and enthusiastic. And then some of the negatives are critical, fault-finding, lack assertion, and emotional. And like I spoke before, if I get into disagreements, I can put my emotions in there, and that's really a negative thing. Some of my communication barriers are hearing what you want to hear, biased listening, and defensive listening, which emerges when an individual perceives or anticipates threat. It is focused on protecting oneself. I've spoken about so many different things that are dangerous really for a relationship, or really dangerous for for the person you're trying to communicate with. And I can really get defensive. As I've learned, I mean, I've always kind of known that, but this class really defined like what I do when someone makes a negative comment about either me or my husband or my parents. And the reason why it builds a barrier is because sometimes they're just trying to help me, or there's really truth in what they're saying, and if I don't get defensive, then I can learn something out of it. On the next slide, solving noise pollution. Noise pollution is terrible because you can be doing all the right things with communicating and listening. You could be using all these different ways in which to effectively communicate, but if there's internal or external noise pollution going on, then it'll just, all of your efforts to communicate well will be in vain. They interfere with your ability to communicate. They are built to prevent internal are barriers that are built to prevent effective listening. That's thoughts, diverted attention, unshared feelings, peer pressure. External is crowded areas, monotone speaking, or time constraints. Enlarging my conversation. There's a few different types. Take the initiative, resist external distractions, keeping an open mind, which is asking questions to clarify for understanding. I really think that this one's important because if I have a closed mind and I don't want to listen, then it's really going to break down communication. And then actively using the talker-listener card. I loved this resource that Peterson developed. And then in conclusion, I really think the Lord has a lot of thoughts about what communication is. One of them is, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and redeemer. And then the other one out of Proverbs is, a word aptly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I loved every minute of this class.